Connecticut's Office of Policy and Management can make an announcement saying the state of Connecticut will be saving $12 billion over the next 25 years, as they did last week. As the department charged with providing crucial information and analysis on the state of the state, they help the governor's office in formulating public policy goals for Connecticut, and guide towns and cities on implementing policy decisions that will benefit the residents of our state. Undersecretary Martin Heft joins the Municipal Voice today to discuss this and more. We'd like to thank our sponsors at Gateway and Housatonic Community Colleges. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH, LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders. Martin, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate to be here.
So you have been on before, but it's been almost 2 years now. So just for our listeners at home, could you give us a little refresher on what OPM does and what your role is there?
Sure, great, and it's great to be back on with you. Overall, OPM functions as the governor's staff agency and plays a central role, in state government, providing information, analysis to formulate public policy for the state, all of our state agencies and municipalities in implementing those policies. The Intergovernmental Policy and Planning Division, which I head up, handles the relationship between the state, our regional council of governments, and our municipalities.
Yeah. So, as you just said, the relationship with municipalities does fall kind of under your purview there. So how does OPM operate and cooperate with Connecticut's municipalities?
Sure. So we have two units in the intergovernmental division. One, the Office of Responsible Growth, and the second is the Assessment, Data Collection, and Grants Management. So we're kind of the conduit, as you've mentioned, for intergovernmental communications between the COGs, between the municipalities, between anything that goes on with the state, between those. So we, between gathering information, disseminating information, anything of needs of the municipalities, the programs that we are available to them, whether it be municipal grants or their municipal plans of conservation and development, affordable housing, any sort of legislative activities that are affecting them, we're going to be that conduit for them.
Well, that sounds really good. Obviously, you cover a lot of stuff there, but is there kind of one thing that you wish municipalities knew they could come to OPM for?
So, no, we don't want them contacting us at all. No, I'm joking.
Lose our number.
I think more so, I don't think most municipalities realize we have the two different units. A lot of them know that we handle the municipal grant side of it. So they obviously looking at their municipal grants. But they're not aware of the Office of Responsible Growth that does head up, the State Plan of Conservation Development, the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act portions of that. So overall, we have a great working relationship with the municipalities. And due to me coming from a municipal background, I often get, numerous inquiries, that necessarily aren't in our wheelhouse. I get them from internal, it's municipal, send them to Martin, and we're always more than happy to, help direct, those municipalities to wherever we need to direct them to. So I don't think there's necessarily, one particular issue that municipalities need to know. It's like OPM is doing, because they know if it's something municipal, they can reach out to us and we'll help find who that right person is to get them there.
Even if it's not you, you'll know the person that they should be talking to.
Right.
So recently, OPM had tweeted about its final budget forecast for the year 2022. And OPM is estimating that the state will save billions of dollars over the next 2 decades. We assume this is a good thing. Can you tell us about the implications for towns and cities with, coffers full, having some savings and kind of other circumstances? Is there a chance that municipalities might see programs like payment in lieu of taxes fully funded?
Sure. So as we know, we're getting ready for the next biennium budget, which will be for fiscal 24 and 25. Governor will present, his budget in February. And as we know, budget involves, estimates, back and forth negotiations, ultimately a vote by the legislature. I think a lot's going to happen in this next budget cycle, being a biennium budget. They just adopted the midterm budget with some adjustments. Municipalities are going to be fighting for, more state aid. as well as state agencies, other organizations, especially as you mentioned, with coffers being a little bit higher right now on that. So to say, is it going to be fully funded, anything, pilot hasn't been fully funded in a number of years. But the good thing is that since fiscal year 2020, state aid to municipalities has grown over 300 million. And that's going to continue to grow because now a lot of the distributions are set with the municipal revenue sharing account, which is portion of the tax proceeds. As those are starting to be phased in, especially under pilot through the motor vehicle tax grant, municipalities are going to see more funding coming their way in those.
Yeah. So in 2021, a tiered plan was approved by the legislature. Where would you say this plan falls in happening between, a realistic and optimistic sort of outlook?
So the tiered pilot, for those that don't know, established 3 tiers of municipalities based upon their equalized net grand list per capita. The formula calculation, in the past was always based upon actual tax revenue loss. It was a reimbursement that way. Now this moves the grants more towards a need basis based upon that net gram list, having the 3 tiers. So we're only a year into that formula, so we haven't really analyzed the full impacts of that and everything. Definitely, the towns are receiving more money, as I mentioned, about 150 million more in pilot this past year because of the new formula and with the municipal revenue sharing, account. So that's always a plus and everything. So we still have to analyze, is this the best new approach to this, process or not? But only being 1 year into it, it's kind of hard to say, is
the
this
jury's,
the right path?
jury's still out, but...
Right.
So
but municipalities are seeing a benefit from this increase in funding that they also attach to it.
So early reports are promising, but will remain to be seen in the long run.
Right.
Well, that's always good. Going to be optimistic. So one thing that is definitely going to affect towns and cities in Connecticut is the revaluation maps that were recently changed to cohere with the councils of governments. Can you explain what OPM's role in this is and why revaluations are important to Connecticut's municipalities?
Sure. So state statutes actually set revaluation in the state of Connecticut, provides that the secretary establish a revaluation schedule. So the revaluation program is basically undertaken to secure a more equitable distribution of the tax burden, bring assessment levels all up to date, equal across the board every 5 years, and to modernize any assessment procedures used on the local level. So the new legislation, which we've been working on with a committee, which is made up of municipal officials, our assessors, we've had tax collectors involved, we've had our COGS involved with this. And basically, we are aligning revaluations with the planning regions, which are governed by the Council of Governments, but actually legislation is by planning region, which are the boundaries of our Council of Governments. And we've made 5 revaluation zones, if you will. So, and that's obviously to coincide with the 5-year schedule.
Yeah.
So currently, our schedule, we may have 1 year where there's 70 towns that are revaluing, and the next year there may only be 10. So obviously we're trying to balance that out and coordinate the revaluation cycles by the municipalities within each zone, basically trying to redistribute the number of revaluations performed annually statewide. Now, most people think, that the whole zone's going to be revalued at the same time. That's not the case. 20% of each zone is going to get revalued each of the 5 years. So over the 5-year period, 20% each year of those zones. And part of that is we worked with vendors, we worked with the municipalities and everything else. It was impossible to try to do the entire zone at once, just because you don't have, the people power to be able to do that. We don't have the, all of that there. So doing it by the 20% by each zone, it still will, provide the benefits that we're looking at.
Yeah. So it just sounds like it's a more efficient schedule, and that, you hit 20% a year, and over 5 years, that means you hit 100%.
Correct.
Well, that makes perfect sense. It sounds like something probably should have been done a while ago. Is there any role OPM plays in motor vehicle assessment?
So yes, it's actually a large role that OPM plays in motor vehicle assessment as well as assessment taxation overall.
Okay.
By statute, most of our stuff is by statute with assessment and taxation. Each grand list year, the secretary has to send out to every town how we are going to price motor vehicles.
Okay.
Historically, we always work with the Connecticut Association of Assessing Officers. That's in statute that we work with them in developing what we're going to use. Currently, we use NADA as their book and their values on that based upon, the current values. But with the new legislation that was passed in the budget package, effective with the Grand List 2023, so October 1st of 23, which will be our tax bills for fiscal year 24, we're going to be changing the process to a manufacturer suggested retail price value with a 20-year depreciation schedule. So for a taxpayer, they're going to know exactly what their tax bill is going to be every year, because they're going to know that here's my manufacturer suggested retail price. I'm at year 10. I can look on the depreciation schedule. This is how much reduction there is. That's what my assessment's going to be times my mill rate. I know what my taxes are.
Okay.
Excuse me. As we've seen this past year, motor vehicle values have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Anywhere, 30, 40%, because obviously because of the pandemic, we've seen the same with housing. This is going to eliminate that because you're going to have a set value and then it's depreciated over 20 years. At that 20-year mark, it's a $500 minimum value. Same as an antique value plate. If you were at 20 years, you could get an antique value at $500. That's going to be your tax bill after 20 years.
That seems to make a lot of sense. So if someone had, 5 years under the old system, if they bought a car 5 years ago, something they could afford the taxes on, whatever, and all of a sudden now, because of the market, that car is actually worth more than what they paid for it, suddenly their taxes would be worth.
Correct.
But the new system would say, your car is getting older, it's slowly going to decrease at this predictable set pace that you can plan for your budgeting.
Correct. Right. And that's kind of the same method that's used with a lot of personal property. Declarations that get filled out by our businesses, they're all on a depreciation schedule. So it's actually following that same methodology.
Okay, so it seems like that makes a whole lot of sense.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM.
So the COGS, back to the COGS a little bit, are interesting because OPM does handle some of the census data, and your department was the one who approached the Census Bureau on their behalf. OPM Secretary Jeffrey Beckham said that there will be no significant impact on how state or local governments are run, but it will have some impact. Do you think at some point it will? It seems like it might just be starting place for greater cooperation in the future, ultimately leading to change in the way we perceive kind of local governments and the COGS role in that.
Yeah, so yes, OPM, we worked with the COGS and internally here, not only with the Office of Responsible Growth that works with all of our COGS as one of our units, but our Data and Policy Analytics unit here at OPM, which is ultimately responsible for the GIS and the data collection pieces, to establish the planning regions as the statistical equivalent of counties. The rationale of this change, as we've put out there from day one, is not a return to county government. It's not to affect home rule or local control. Basically, it's aligning the data of the planning regions rather than the defunct counties that we don't use anymore since the 60s, since, even though there are still boundaries that we have. But overall, it's going to improve our abilities in planning and decision-making, looking at the planning regions of how we're operating, in municipal government, how we're looking at things by the state and everything. It's going to help more in our planning and decision-making. So we see those as those changes and the impacts that it's going to be coming down the road, not necessarily the way that we, run government.
Yeah. And also the county equivalency for the COGS allows some access to federal monies like ARP and stuff like that, right?
So yeah, we're not, we haven't, the states, let's put it, the state is not losing any federal dollars by not having the county equivalency. This provides another opportunity or another source to be able to apply for funding. So where in the past, where if it was a county equivalence or county funds coming in, the state would receive those and distribute them, accordingly. So that is something we will work with, our council of governments with, that if there's certain funding out there, who's better to administer it? Is it on the planning region level, or is it on the state level, depending what it is? But at this point, we haven't seen that we're losing any money in that sense, but it does provide some more opportunities for us.
And could some of these changes possibly change the way OPM interacts with municipalities in the future?
So I think so. As we've talked about, the planning and decision-making processes, we're consistently looking at, shared services, regionalization, have better efficiencies, potential cost savings, and being able to analyze more accurately with this data at this level. It's going to be a benefit to both the state and to the municipalities overall. So I think that will be, small changes the way we're interacting by the data that we're going to be able to receive and analyze.
We've talked a lot about taxes and revaluations and kind of money stuff that makes a lot of sense. Seems like a natural fit for OPM. But you also recently were talking about in an article about the drought. You had announced that there's steps that should be taken to reduce water usage in Connecticut. So first of all, what is OPM's role in the area of water usage?
So OPM has a seat on the Connecticut Water Planning Council, which is established by state statute.
Okay.
And then also as my seat as representative on the Water Planning Council, I chair the Interagency Drought Work Group. Okay. Both of these were created under the state water plan and the drought plan that have been adopted.
For everyone out there that doesn't pay as close attention, what kind of drought are we in? Like, how bad is it in Connecticut?
So currently, the drought plan, we have 5 stages.
Okay.
Stage 3 is actually when we declare a drought in the state, that we actually have a drought in the state. Currently, the entire state is at a stage 2.
Okay.
And so that's kind of more of a public awareness state.
Okay, so not a full-on drought yet.
We're getting close to that next level. So we want to make you aware. We get information out, ways to conserve water, things that you should be aware of. So when we go to stage 3, you're aware of these things and it's more of a heightened awareness. Stage 4 is when we start getting into certain, mandatory restrictions and everything else as we start getting into worse scenarios.
Okay. So like when we see like pictures from out west where like Lake Mead is drying up, that's like that would be like stage 4 or 5 for us.
Correct. Yeah. Those are in, dire drought situations. Yes.
Okay. And we're not anywhere near there yet in Connecticut.
We're not at those stages yet. Unfortunately, weather forecasts, as we know, we haven't been receiving precipitation. The warmer temperatures that we're having, those are not all good mixes for helping, get us out of drought. But, conditions are worsening. So we're, keep progressing there. We actually have a meeting later this week, on the drought and making any recommendations to the governor, once we go through all of the data.
Yeah, I certainly know I haven't had to mow my brownish lawn as much recently. So what would the impacts on the towns be of some of these water restrictions if we had to put them in? And also some of the stuff you're talking about to get us ready.
So municipalities, whether they're served by a public water system, whether they're on private wells, I think the biggest thing is to be aware of the conditions and be aware of their responsibilities. Each municipality has what we call a municipal drought liaison that is set up through their Department of Emergency Management, Homeland Security.
Okay.
Some of those are their emergency management directors. Some are a volunteer that's dealing with the drought, and they report back through their Demis region. So we are in constant communication with them, letting them know any actions that the town should be taking. But also the reverse is we want to know what's happening in their towns. Okay. 2 years ago, we had private wells drying up down in lower eastern, Connecticut, Voluntown area, as an example. So getting that information back to us, is helpful so we can start ascertaining, what are the conditions, what's happening here on that. So, it's a two-way street. We need to make sure that the communication's flowing back and forth, and those municipalities through the liaisons, through their Demis regions, become that conduit back to us and us to them. Yeah. And then municipalities may also want to look at adopting local water conservation ordinances. We do have a number of municipalities that have them already, so that when we do get to these stages, they have some authority to actually put local restrictions on, similar to that the water suppliers have already. Some of our restrictions can't really happen until like stage 4 of the drought, unless the governor calls for like emergency declarations and everything prior to that.
But the municipal ones could go into in effect before yours could.
Correct. The municipality would have their own local authority that they, depending upon the local conditions, could, be at a higher stage than what the state is at. Correct.
Yeah, so their time of particular might actually be in a drier area, or their aquifers, whatever, where the rest of the state might not be. That's
right, and we do see that, where it's it's hard because we do look at things by the county level, as we're looking at things, but we know that there's little pockets here and there that are worse than others, on that. So that's why
the water doesn't pay attention to counties or town lines or anything like that. Yeah,
exactly.
Once again, like the last time we had you on the show, we're just beginning to understand the pandemic. And when we had you on last, we asked what the immediate future looked like for OPM. So now looking back on, 2 years on it, how have the last few years operated for OPM? Was it difficult to maintain certain projects for a while during all this? And have you gotten back to some of them?
Sure. So, as you said, so much has happened. It's hard to believe it's been 2 years of the pandemic. And I definitely feel, teleworking has definitely changed the way we conduct business, on, a municipal level, with municipalities having to do things, remotely, having remote meetings, collecting taxes more maybe online, Office of Policy Management. We've went through and processed over the past couple of years millions of dollars with the CARES Act funding and the American Rescue Plan Act. We're in the process now of getting the second tranche of that out toward the municipalities. So, in one sense, we've just been going strong throughout this whole thing because we've had kind of, our role got shifted where we're dealing with getting funding out and overseeing some of the pandemic money that came down from federal government, on top of as well as getting all of our normal, work that needed to be done. The one thing that was kind of, if you will, saving grace during that period was on the legislative side. They really weren't in session. That first year, they did one bill, on it. So there was very little. And the second year was, even smaller. We're back, this past year more into a full, General Assembly. So we weren't as much dealing with the legislative pieces, which was good because we had this other work that we needed to have done. So, but overall, we were able to reprioritize, extend some of the deadlines, through executive orders to help municipalities, to help the state and everything else. But we kept things on track and kept things progressing. So we didn't, in essence, miss deadlines. No work was pushed off. We kept everything up to date. We're currently on track, here at OPM with the things we're doing, starting to work on, some of the newer things. And so we're in good shape.
Speaking of newer things, what do you see in the forecast for OPM over the next months, years? Are there, some new plans that you're excited, a change to the way you're doing business? So we'll start off over the next several months. Municipalities are going to see a number of municipal grants coming out that are going to be awarded. That application processes are out now. Which is exciting for them. And I know they're all working, to get applications in by the deadlines, but you've got $30 million in STEEP coming up, the Small Town Economic Assistance Program. We've got $12 million in Transit-Oriented Development Program. Our COGS have the Regional Performance Incentive Program, which municipalities, shared services, looking at those. We're looking at, getting funds of that out. We're also going to be announcing early fall the Intertown Capital Equipment Sharing Program, which hasn't been done since 2015. So that's kind of near term. And there's still time to apply for towns to apply to a lot of these?
Yes. Yep. Deadline, like for STEEP, the first STEEP is August 15th. The TOD grant is September 1st. So
all that kind of stuff would be on like the OPM website or something?
Until the fall. So, yeah. And I think, more longer term, as you're going to see more of the reporting that has to happen to OPM, at least in my division, is going to be online.
Okay.
It's not going to be paper. We're eliminating paper. We've already put a couple different modules up so people can do their reporting online. We talked about revaluation. Some of the certifications that have to come to OPM are going to be online now. It's not going to be submitting paper forms either by email or whatever else. You're going to upload it into the portal system. We had just switched over our distressed municipalities program into the portal system. We did all of the COVID over our portal system online, eliminating all that. So we're trying to work on streamlining those type of processes for everybody. And I think as we move into the next, post-election in this legislative session, you're going to see a greater focus on shared services, regionalization. And we know it's talked about all the time, but I honestly believe there's going to be a much stronger, incentive and, push for this to happen. Obviously, one of the things, with my background and being here at OPM, we want to work with the municipalities, on these approaches to streamline those services, create efficiencies, help reduce that tax burden. Overall, those are, main goals that we're seeing going forward here over this next year.
Excellent. Martin, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time, and keep doing the work.
No, it's great. No, it's great to be here. And, anytime that we can be of help with, CCM and our member municipalities, we're more than happy to do so.
We'd like to thank our guest, Martin Heft. I'd like to thank our sponsors at Gateway Community College and Housatonic Community College. Learn more at gatewayct.edu and housatonic.edu. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM at WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Loring is our executive producer. Christopher Gilson is our producer. Harry Draws is on the boards. And I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like. And watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page. CCM's annual convention returns Tuesday, November 1st at the Mohegan Sun Convention Center. This year's convention will be capped off by Connecticut's final 2022 gubernatorial debate. Learn more at ccm-ct.org.